Hello everyone and happy February. Welcome to another series of beginner watercolor lessons. I want to talk about our supplies. First of all, the full supply list is down in the description below, and you don't need to get everything that's on the supply list. That's just some of the things I recommend. One of the papers that I have listed down there is the Paul Rubens 100% cotton watercolor paper. Whatever paper you start with, I strongly recommend that you get 100% cotton because it will make your life easier in learning how watercolor works. Once you've figured out and you feel a little bit more confident, then go to a wood pulp paper. That's just my advice based on the experience I had when I first picked up watercolor. I actually did not even get into watercolor until much later in my artistic life, and it was a huge struggle at first, and it really was very irritating. And then someone suggested I try 100% cotton paper, and I felt like if I had done that in the first place, I would have just understood it a whole lot better. So that's my advice to you, is get 100% cotton paper. This one is the Be Creative line, and I like this because it's in journal format. It has a micro perforation, so you can just tear things right out. There are all kinds of sizes, and the size we're working on for this particular lesson is the 8.5 by 11, which is close to an A4 for those of you who measure that way. This stuff here, this tape, is called washi tape. For those of you who are not familiar with it, it is a very low tack tape, and they come in fun designs. Sometimes they can come in solid colors as well. If you didn't want to get washi tape, you could definitely just get some drafting tape or painter's tape from your hardware store. Anything that has that real low tack. If you do get painter's tape, get the one for delicate surfaces. We need to be able to take this tape off and not harm the paper. The paintbrushes that we're going to use are the Princeton Snap line. Now, if you already are a little bit experienced with watercolor and you already have some brushes that you love, go ahead and use those. I use these primarily for gouache and for teaching my beginner students because I love the amount of feedback you get from a nylon filament brush. This golden Taklon nylon, anything like that. Excellent for gouache, excellent for beginners. So that's the brush I recommend. We've got to have a water vessel, and I have this 2Well water cup here. You can just use a jar. Paper towel, I've got several more over there in case I need. And the paints we're going to use for this series are the Winsor Newton Cotman line. Now the Cotman line is their student line, but these colors, these pigments, I really love because they really are very close to what you will get in a professional pigment. They don't have a whole lot of added fillers. They've got proprietary light fastness rating system, but you can use these in your sketchbook, have some great color come out, really vivid translucency to your colors. They've got the right amount of flow. It's just a really nice set to start with. So that's what we're going to be starting with here today. The painting that we're going to do today, I've got this divided into two parts. I put a little post up in my community tab asking you guys what you would like to paint in February. And I decided to incorporate these into an entire series for the month. This is just for the month of February that involves food. So for all of you beginner artists out there that want to learn how to paint food, we're going to have some fun this month. So for our beginner lessons this month, each week will be a different food. Today, it's chocolate covered strawberries. So let's start with our reference photo. It is from Unsplash, which is a reference photo site that is free for artists. Now, what we have in a reference photo is we have an awful lot going on. We've got a big plate of strawberries over here and a few individuals over here. Since this is a beginner lesson, we're going to focus on just a few of the strawberries. I'm using a sketching pencil. You can use whatever you want, a regular Click pencil, but I want to use a sketch pencil. These are water soluble. You can use a watercolor pencil. I'm just going to use this because it's sitting right in front of me. If not, just use a regular school Click pencil, whatever you've got. So the thing I like about in the reference photo, the strawberries that are on the left, is that they're all facing different directions. That's going to give us a nice, pleasing presentation for our strawberries, and I want to choose 3 of them. So the first one that I want to choose is the one kind of in the middle on the left, and it is, here's the bottom end of it. Now when you're drawing something, you want to kind of get the basic shape in first. So it's really round, kind of comes up this way, kind of flat, it's kind of elliptical. And then we've got the chocolate that's spilling out here and kind of making a nice little skirt on it. So that's there. And then we have this narrow point of the strawberry, and then it comes way up like that. And then in here we've got the leaves. Now let's see, there's one here. And we've got one that comes this way. One that comes this way and kind of bends down. So that's a fun way to have that one. And then, oh, there's a couple. There's one in the center. We can add that one too if we want to. This one comes up and bends down towards us, like so. This one's kind of crumpled and off to the side, and to be honest with you, I can't see it that well, so we're just going to add that in there. And then we've got the one here that is bent kind of toward the middle too. Let's have that one come in. And a little one right about here. I guess there's some more. We'll put another one down here. Okay, so I like that one, and here's kind of our line where the chocolate starts and the strawberry begins. Right about like that. All right, and then we have another one that is facing this direction, and let's put that one up here. In the interest of time, I've got this portion of the tutorial sped up just a little bit, but basically you're going to do the same thing with the other two strawberries. Just keep in mind the shape that your strawberry has and what direction it's facing, and put those leaves in however you wish. I took a lot of artistic license with the strawberry leaves that I have, and that's certainly okay for you to do as well. There we are. Now, right now, to me, to my eye, it looks like this one's sitting down, this one's sitting down, and this one's just kind of standing up. But once we get shadows in here, it will all make sense, because we can take this pencil, which is going to give us a wash of gray, and we can put a nice shadow line on it here. And when we're all done, that will be able to incorporate into our painting. Now, if you're not using a water-soluble pencil, don't worry about that. We'll catch that when we get to it. All right, so we've got our drawing, and I'm leaving my lines fairly dark so that you guys can see them. In fact, we've got some really nice cool yellow, and cool red and a warm red. And I think it would be really fun if we start. Now, I have already used my paints here. If you'd like to see a review on this set, I can put a little card up there in the corner so that you can click over to that to see if this is something you're interested in. I see that I'm going to need to spray my paints, and I've got some smudges in here that were from previous uses before, but that's not going to be a problem. So let's just spray the paints, and that way they'll activate and just be a little bit easier to use right at first. Okay, let's start with the number 6, and we'll go right into the strawberries. So I think what I want to do first is the leaves. Now I'm going to go in with my lighter green, so I'm just getting some of that sap green from the pan and making a little puddle over here. And we'll just start by putting this green in our little leaves that we drew. Just start by filling in the entire leaf area with that sap green. We'll take the warm yellow, which is your cadmium yellow hue, and let's mix in some of that ultramarine blue. That's going to give us a nice deep green. And that way we can fill in wet on wet some of these areas on our leaves that we want to be a little bit darker. And when we do wet on wet in watercolor, it really enables us to have very soft edges. So let's just continue with the leaves on the strawberries. And as you go on doing this, you'll just go in with that layer of sap green first, and then you'll come back in and just drop in some of that darker green that you've mixed so that you can add some kind of shadow shape and dimension to your leaves. Let's go into the chocolate. I'm going to mix some of the burnt sienna with some of the burnt umber, and that's going to give me a little bit warmer tone but a little bit richer tone. So let's start over here with with this guy over here. And just going to put that right there, and then I'm going to take my wet brush that I've tapped off on a paper towel, And I'm just going to pull that on the strawberry. And you can see right here where it touched the green. That's okay, don't panic. We're just going to leave that like that for now. Come down here. And be very careful around here because we know that this green is not quite dry. But right there, that's going to be okay. Sometimes when those little accidents happen, you can use them to your advantage and really make some fun effects on your watercolor. Now, if you really don't want any of these colors to touch or mix, just be sure that you thoroughly dry it between steps. What I'm doing now is I'm just kind of dropping in some of this burnt sienna with the burnt umber and just kind of letting them blend and mix on the page, because that burnt sienna will represent the lighter portion of the chocolate and that burnt umber will fill in nicely as a darker portion. By using this wet on wet technique where I've got that burnt sienna pulled across the strawberry with some clean water, or just from when I'm rinsing my brush and my brush is still damp, I can go ahead and drop in the burnt umber and let it mix on the page, and that way I can get a really soft, natural gradient. Wet on wet is a good technique to just kind of practice whenever you have a moment or two, because you do want the pigment that you drop into your wet surface to be about the same consistency as what you already have on the paper. I think I'm going to add just a little bit more burnt sienna up here on this one. All right, now one thing I want to do is to take this pile of brown, I'm going to go in with our burnt umber, and I'm going to mix with it some of that ultramarine blue. What that will do is it'll create a nice deep brown or a gray. The more blue we add, the more towards gray it gets. That's a wonderful shadow tone. So for this little area right in here on the strawberry where the chocolate, where the strawberry dents in the chocolate comes down, we do need a shadow there. So let's use our darkest tone and very gently, I'm very barely touching this with my brush. Just letting that shadow tone result. And over here, we're going to do it along the edge, and then I'm going to come back with my wet brush and just go along the edge of that pigment and just give it a place to travel. So there you go. Now suddenly we've given that a shadow, and we'll come back and do that here to these as well, because let's see, our light source would be coming from this direction. So that means we'd have a bit of a shadow along here. We're just going to go in with that darker pigment right about here. And then come back in with a wet brush or damp brush and just go along the edge of that so that that shadow paint, that where we painted the shadow, so that that can have a place to travel. Watercolor wants to go where there is water. So as long as you give it a path, it'll go there. So let's start with that blue, and we'll go back into our puddle that we had mixed with the green here. Back into our warm yellow, just a very little bit of warm yellow. I want this to be a very dark, dingy green. That looks very nice. Let's just kind of drop in some of this here on these darker portions. So look back at your reference photo and just kind of decide where you want those darker portions of the leaves and just drop them in. I've also dropped in some cadmium yellow light at the very end to just kind of let it disperse and spread throughout those leaf centers. Now we're going to dry this thoroughly with a heat tool. Let's go into the cool red. Alizarin crimson is a great shade to have. Any kind of a magenta. Just kind of get this going here. And then the one I want to mix next to it is the cadmium red light. I'm going to put a puddle of that over here too, because it's kind of orange, pretty warm. But when we get these two together, it's going to be nice. See that? How it just picks up a nice bit of coral tone to it. And when you're working with reds and strawberries, and we don't have a lot of the strawberry showing, but it's kind of fun to be able to show that. So I'm going to go into the cadmium red side of this puddle. A little bit more alizarin in there. There we go. And let's just start on. Now I'm not meeting the edge of the chocolate because chocolate has a thickness. So I'm coming in just a little bit. But let's start on this edge over here rinse off our brush and blot it off, and now let's just pull this over to this side. And we'll do that same technique on all of these here. This is where we're really going to start to show the shape of our strawberries. They have a lot of hills and peaks and valleys, and we need to accentuate those with the level of value of our red. Now, where the red is deepest, it's going to be either the ripest or the most deep cleft in the strawberry, and where it's a little more pale, the strawberry won't be as ripe, or that area will be risen up a little bit. So we can use that difference in value to really create a gradient in our strawberry, which will in turn give us some form and shape. Now, I'm just going to go through and kind of erase the pencil lines. You only want to do this after you have completely dried your work, because you don't want to smudge your watercolor. And with this step, just remember that if you have painted over your pencil lines, they won't be able to be erased. So now we can get in here and tidy some things up and finish some of our detail. So first things first, I really like how this is playing together here. That's a very nice watercolor effect. Don't be afraid to let your watercolors do what they want to do, because that, in my mind, is what really makes a painting special. So now what I'm going to do is go back into this alizarin crimson here. But I want to tone it down just a little bit. So this might be counterintuitive, but I'm going to take some of the sap green and mix that in. And I'm just going to, what that will do, since that is a complementary color, is it'll help deepen that red. Do you see how that made that almost a brownish red? That will be very good for us for our showing dimension on our strawberries. All right, so now let's look at the darkest portions of red on our strawberries, starting with this one here, down here underneath. Let's mix a little bit more green with that red and really get it nice and deep. We almost want it to be a brick red. There we go, and we can certainly put some in here too. And then I'll just go a little bit right up next to the leaves there. And now I will come back in with my damp brush and just kind of let that pigment have a pathway to play on the strawberry. And I'm going to come back in too with just some plain alizarin crimson and kind of just deepen this shade a little bit. There. Can you see how that gave our strawberry some shape? I want to drop in some more of this dark, dark red here, because we would have a slight shadow from that leaf coming down. So if you can see, that really gave that strawberry some shape. That's how we create form in watercolor and any kind of art, really, is by creating shadows which give us dimensionality and shape. That shadows are our best friend, because they tell us how the light is hitting that subject. That's how we can tell what that object or element in our art looks like in space. Once again, you're just going to repeat those same steps on each strawberry where you have the exposed fruit in between the leaf and the chocolate. By mixing that alizarin crimson with the sap green, we're using complementary color theory, and what that does is it will help to take that red, that beautiful, bright, vibrant alizarin crimson, and just mellow it out a little bit more by using the color that is its opposite on the color wheel. So we're going to do the same thing with our chocolate. Now what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to go in with just the burnt sienna, and I want it fairly thin, about like 2% milk. And I'm going to place this burnt sienna along all of the edges and areas here, kind of avoiding touching that red because it's still a little bit wet. And now I'll come in with, on the other side of this here, the burnt umber, concentrating the pigment kind of away from the light. Let's put a little bit more in here. And I got that. Here's what happens if you don't want that strawberry to mix with the chocolate. Let's just take a dry paper towel and blot that off, and I will come back to that. You know what? Let's not take any more risks. Let's make sure that everything is completely dry before we continue. Alrighty. Now we'll get back to this burnt umber over here. You may have noticed that as soon as you got that vibrant red of the strawberries completed, that the chocolate kind of looked a little lackluster. And of course we intended on going back and adding some more glazes over it, but what we're doing is realizing that watercolor has a color shift. We'll go in and kind of repeat these same steps that we did with the chocolate, putting the burnt sienna toward the light and then the burnt umber toward the shadow side. And we'll use that same wet on wet, dropping that in, adding some shadows to these strawberries to just kind of finalize the way that they look here. So we'll go ahead and go back to real time on this strawberry on the left so you can kind of see what we're doing. There we are. I think we might be able to see just a touch of the chocolate right over here. That's the kind of detail you may not need to worry about. But if you want to put it in, go ahead. Now I've got the dark mix again. And let's go into the burnt umber. Accidentally grabbed the burnt sienna there. We want the burnt umber for the chocolate down here. And then back into our very dark mix. I need just a little bit more of it, I think. There we are. And we can place some of it on the strawberry, a little bit there, and then we can also definitely put it along this edge. And come back with our wet brush and just let all of that soften up. See how that softened that edge immediately? So nice. Now I'm just kind of going to go around and add a little bit to these shadows here, just kind of making them a little deeper, adding a little bit more detail where the leaves would be casting a shadow, just really having fun with it and really enjoying the contrast that these shadows are creating. Now I want to have it completely dry because we need to also go back and take a look at the leaves. I'm going to turn my palette around and I am going to mix another green. I'm going to mix the cadmium yellow that we had before. And you can almost see the cad yellow that we dropped in here. I'll just leave that like it is. But we'll come back in with that cadmium yellow and then we'll go into our ultramarine and mix a green. That's a nice earthy green. There we go, kind of a mid-tone green. And let's just kind of come along these edges here and clean up. We can put a little dot in the middle. Just kind of make little separations on these leaves so it's a little more obvious what's what. And we'll just continue that leaf definition all around each strawberry. One thing you want to look out for is any white space that you have that you may not want. For instance, some of those leaves weren't exactly touching the strawberry, but in real life, you know, there's not a white border around it, and we don't want it to look like a cutout or a sticker. So let's just clean all of those up and make sure we get it completely dry once again. And our chocolates have some beautiful drizzles on them. My bleed proof white was looking really weird last time. Yeah, it kind of got all flaky. I mean, I can still use it. Oops. But I don't like it. So I don't want to, normally it doesn't look that way. I need to figure out what's going on with that. It might be nothing, but I got to figure it out. So let's use a paint pen, or you can use a colored pencil or white gouache, whatever you want to do. I'm going to use this paint pen. And let's just go ahead and fill in some of the chocolate. Now this strawberry here has the white chocolate that starts up here. And the way that we're going to do this is just put our lines where it's going first. And of course you don't have to do this exactly like it is, but remember when you curve, by curving up I'm going over a hump, and by curving down I'm kind of coming up to another, you know, down is a lower point on the berry, and then we go up. So remember that you've got, this will also, these lines will also really help to determine the shape. And every once in a while, if your paint pen stops working, just tap it on a paper towel. And let's see here, we can put this, it's kind of a drizzle that ended up down here. We do want to be a little bit thoughtful when we're adding these lines because these lines will really help our viewers see the shape of this item. It's three-dimensionality. So you can see I've made those curves and thicknesses of the lines really follow the curve of the berry. So right now I'm using this pen. It is an oil-based pen, and that's going to come into play later. But for now, let's take a look and see what we've got. There, so now we have our chocolate on there, but you can see this is too white down here for our value. So what we're going to do to get this to shade a little bit is now we're going to go in with a pencil. Now if you're, depends on what you used here. Now since I used an oil-based paint pen, I can't go back with watercolor because it just won't show, it won't stick to it. It will just resist it. But I'm going in here a little bit with this pencil and just muddying this up a bit. And now I'll go in with my water. And just kind of blend that around. I have found these Derwent water-soluble drawing or sketching pencils rather to be just a little bit unique. I think they have a touch of oil in them because I have found in some cases if I do my sketch with them ahead of time, the watercolor resists the dense sketch lines. So I'm going to take advantage of that characteristic of these and use it to shade the white. Now I want it to be a little bit sheer. I've got the lightest wash of the pencil. I just want to put that white in shadow. So if you didn't have one of these, you could use a pastel pencil and just smudge it a bit with your finger, or you could use a little bit of colored pencil in just a very light gray, something to just put that white chocolate in shadow. Now we've already got the brown chocolate in shadow, but we need to get that white chocolate to follow the same curve and shape as the base chocolate on our strawberries. So I'm only putting this shadow on the white chocolate itself, and that's what you'll do too if you're using a pastel pencil or a colored pencil. Just draw lightly only on the chocolate itself because we really don't want to muddy up the chocolate that we've already put on the strawberries. All right, we are looking good. Let's pull this up a little bit to kind of get this shadow a little bit of a gradient here. There we are. I'm really liking this. I'm liking the strawberries. The only thing we're missing is the little detail on the strawberries themselves. So that is kind of a yellow. I'm going to go in on the strawberries with a yellow colored pencil and make those little divots. We don't need to do anything in real great detail. I'll zoom in here so you can see what I'm doing. I'm just putting some seed lines here and there. Sorry if my hand is in the way. Just little bits here and there. You don't have to draw every one, just to suggest that it's there. And this is the yellow ochre. Okay, and now we can go in with a very dark red, and now we can go around the very edge of some of these little seed pits to give a shadow somewhat, because they're kind of indented, and I know that my hand is in the way a little bit. I'm sorry. What I'm doing is I'm going around the shadow side of these yellow seeds just to give that a little bit of a shadow where it would be an indent. See how that helps that little yellow seed stand out a bit? Just remember where your light source is coming from, and then all of your shadows will make sense. There we have it. I think that is a pretty good representation. What we can do with this here is we can add just a little bit of shading underneath the leaves to help them come up off of the strawberry a little bit. Don't need much, just a little. There. Now what you can do if you wanted to, you could give this a whole background, but I think I'm going to leave it white. I rarely leave things white, but I really like the way this one turned out. So I'm just going to use my pencil to sign it, and I'll sign my name and the date, and I'm doing this in January, so I'm going to put January 24. I always recommend that you date and sign your paintings because this is a snapshot in time of where you are at this moment in your artistic journey, and it really, you'll thank yourself later if you have taken the time to document where you are. So this is my version of chocolate covered strawberries, and I hope everyone is excited for February. Spring has got to be coming soon, you guys. We got to have more sunshine soon. Well, I don't know about you, but I thought that was a really good way to spend about a half an hour, and I hope that you feel accomplished if you painted along, and if you just watched along for the first time and plan to paint later, maybe you'll be lucky enough to actually have real-life chocolate-covered strawberries sitting in front of you. I challenge you to paint them before you eat them all. Tune in next Saturday, guys, and we'll have another beginner watercolor lesson. We'll have fun this month. We'll see ya. Stay creative, everybody. Bye now.